I went to the farm with my older brother, but something changed between us. Gay love story. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you are watching from, and never forget to like, subscribe, and also press the bell icon for more new videos to show your love for us. Let's enjoy the story, everyone. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Neither had the silence between us. Ethan sat across from me in the truck, his jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the blurred road ahead. The windshield wipers moved in frantic rhythm, but they couldn't clear the tension that had settled thick as fog between us. I didn't know when it started, this heaviness, this unspoken thing that made every breath feel complicated. Maybe it was that night by the barn. Maybe it was long before that. All I knew was that something had changed between us. Neither of us had the courage to name it. My name is Jamie, and Ethan isn't actually my brother, not by blood anyway, but he might as well be. We grew up together on neighboring farms in rural Montana. 2 kids with dirt under their nails and dreams bigger than the endless sky. Our families were so close that the word brother just stuck. Ethan was 2 years older, 2 inches taller, and had always been the one I looked up to. He taught me how to fix a tractor engine, how to throw a proper punch, how to navigate the complicated terrain of being a young man in a place where certain things were never discussed. We were 20 and 22 now. Back home for the summer to help with the harvest. College has taken us to different cities, different lives, but every summer we returned to the land that raised us, to the routines that felt like muscle memory. This year, though, everything felt different. Ethan felt different. Or maybe I was the one who had changed. The truck hit a pothole, jolting us both. Ethan's hand shot out instinctively to steady the coffee cup in the center console. For just a second, his fingers brushed against mine. It was nothing, an accident, meaningless. But my heart lurched in my chest like I'd touched a live wire. I pulled my hand back quickly, too quickly, and pretended to adjust the radio. Static filled the cab. Neither of us spoke. "We're almost there," Ethan said finally, his voice rough from disuse. He hadn't shaved in days, and the stubble along his jaw caught the gray morning light in a way that made my throat go dry. I forced myself to look away, focusing instead on the familiar landscape rolling past endless fields of wheat. Fence posts marching toward the horizon, the dark shape of the old Peterson barn in the distance. My dad's farm came into view. The white farmhouse standing proud, despite its peeling paint and sagging porch. Smoke rose from the chimney. Mom was up early, as always. The sight should have brought comfort, but instead I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks here, living in close quarters with Ethan while we worked the fields together. 2 weeks of pretending everything was normal. That I hadn't spent the last 3 months replaying every conversation we'd ever had, searching for clues I'd missed, signs I'd been too blind to see. Ethan parked the truck near the barn, killing the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. Rain drummed on the roof, a steady percussion that filled the space between us. I could feel him looking at me, feel the weight of his gaze like a physical thing, but I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes. Not yet. Not when I didn't trust what he might see in mine. "Jamie," he said, and there was something in his voice. A question, maybe, or a plea. My name had never sounded like that before. Weighted with meaning I couldn't decode. I grabbed my duffel bag from the back seat, breaking the moment. "We should get inside. Mom's probably got breakfast ready." My voice came out steadier than I felt, which was a small mercy. We ran through the rain to the porch, our boots splashing through puddles. And by the time we burst through the front door, we were both soaked and laughing. It was the first real sound of joy between us in days, and it felt like oxygen after holding your breath underwater. Mom appeared from the kitchen, flour dusting her hands, her face lighting up at the sight of us. "My boys," she said, pulling us both into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and home. "Look at you, half drowned. Get those wet clothes off before you catch your death." Ethan and I exchanged a glance, brief, familiar, almost normal. Almost. Then he headed upstairs to the guest room where he always stayed, and I went to my old bedroom, the one that still had posters of baseball players and a map of Montana on the walls. I peeled off my wet shirt and caught my reflection in the mirror above my dresser. Same brown eyes, same freckles scattered across my nose, same angular face that had finally grown into itself sometime during freshman year. But I looked different to myself now. It's like a stranger wearing my skin. When had I started noticing the way Ethan's hands looked when he gripped a steering wheel? When had his laugh become the sound I listened for in every crowded room? When had the word brother started to feel like a lie I was telling myself? I pulled on dry clothes and tried to shake off the questions that had been haunting me for months. This was ridiculous. Ethan was my best friend, my brother in every way that mattered. These feelings, whatever they were, would pass. They had to pass. There was no other option in a place like this, in a life like ours. Breakfast was loud and chaotic in the way family meals always were. My younger sister, Casey, peppered Ethan with questions about college football, while Mom kept piling pancakes onto our plates. Dad sat at the head of the table, talking about the weather forecast and the timeline for bringing in the wheat. It was familiar, comfortable, safe. But under the table, my knee bounced with nervous energy, and I couldn't seem to focus on anything except the sound of Ethan's voice, the way he laughed at Casey's jokes, the brief moment when his foot accidentally bumped against mine and we both froze. "You boys will start in the north field today," Dad said, snapping me back to attention. "Fences need mending before we can move the equipment in. Probably take you most of the day." "Yes, sir," Ethan and I said in unison, an old habit from childhood. Dad nodded, satisfied, and returned to his coffee. Mending fences, of course. I caught Ethan's eye across the table and saw something flicker. Their amusement, maybe, or irony. We both knew what a day in the north field meant. Hours of work in relative isolation. Just the two of us and the endless Montana sky. There would be nowhere to hide from whatever this thing was between us. After breakfast, we loaded the truck with supplies wire, posts, tools, water jugs, sandwiches Mom had packed. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the sky remained heavy and gray, promising more. We drove in silence again, but this time it felt different, less suffocating. Maybe we were both too tired to maintain the tension. Or maybe the familiar rhythm of farm work had already started to ease us back into our old dynamic. The north field stretched out before us, a sea of green wheat rippling in the wind. The fence line ran along the eastern edge, separating our land from the Hendersons' property. Several posts had rotted through over the winter, and the wire sagged in places where deer had pushed through. It was honest work, the kind that required muscle and patience but left your mind free to wander. We fell into the rhythm. Ethan digging post holes while I measured and cut wire. Then switching roles, working in tandem like we'd done 1,000 times before. The physical labor felt good, grounding. For a while, I could almost forget the complicated tangle of feelings knotted up in my chest. "Remember when we rebuilt this whole section?" Ethan said, breaking hours of silence. He was holding a post steady while I tamped dirt around its base. Sweat darkened his t-shirt despite the cool air, and his hair curled at his temples. "You were what, 14? 13, I corrected. "And you made me do all the digging because you said it would build character," he grinned. And God, that grin still had the power to make my stomach flip. It did, didn't it? Look at you now, practically a professional fence mender. "My lifelong dream," I said dryly, but I was smiling too. The moment felt fragile. Precious a glimpse of what we used to be before everything got complicated. I wanted to hold on to it, to live in it forever. But already I could feel it slipping away. Ethan's smile faded as he looked at me, really looked at me, and his expression shifted into something I couldn't read. "Jamie, he started, then stopped. His hand came up, like he might reach for me, then dropped back to his side. "Never mind." "What?" I pressed, my heart suddenly racing. "What were you going to say?" He shook his head, turning back to the fence. "Nothing. It's nothing, Nate." But it wasn't nothing. I could see it in the set of his shoulders, hear it in the careful way he chose his next words. "We should keep moving. Got a lot of fence to cover before dark." We worked through the afternoon, the almost conversation hanging between us like smoke. The sky darkened, threatening more rain, and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of wet earth and growing things. My hands were blistered, My back ached, but I welcomed the physical discomfort. It was easier to deal with than the emotional confusion that plagued every quiet moment. Around 4 o'clock, the sky finally made good on its promise. Rain came down in sheets, soaking us within seconds. We ran for the truck, laughing despite ourselves, and climbed inside, slamming the doors against the downpour. Water dripped from our hair, our clothes, pooling on the seats. Ethan tried to start the engine, but it sputtered and died. "Shit," he muttered, trying again. Nothing. "The battery must be dead." "Perfect," I said, though without much heat. "How long do you think the storm will last?" He peered through the rain-streaked windshield at the churning sky. "Could be hours. We should probably wait it out here, trapped in a truck with Ethan during a thunderstorm." The universe had a cruel sense of humor. I tried to get comfortable, pulling my wet shirt away from my skin, but the cab felt impossibly small. Our shoulders nearly touched. I could hear him breathing, could smell the mix of rain and sweat and something distinctly him. Lightning cracked across the sky, followed by thunder that rattled the windows. I jumped slightly, then felt embarrassed. Ethan noticed. "Still scared of storms?" he asked, and there was no mockery in his voice, only gentle familiarity. "Not scared?" I protested. "Just startled." "Right." He was smiling again, that soft smile that felt like it was just for me. "That's why you used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms when we were kids." "I was 10, I defended. "And your room was closer to the bathroom." Strategic positioning. Sure it was. The memory settled between us those nights when storm fear had driven me to seek comfort in Ethan's presence. The way he'd never made me feel childish for it. Just shifted over and let me stay until morning. How simple things had been then. How uncomplicated friendship felt before hormones and self-awareness turned everything upside down. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked quietly. "Being kids, I mean, when everything was easier?" Ethan's smile faded. He was quiet for a long time, watching the rain, and I thought maybe he wouldn't answer. Then, every day. Something in his voice made me turn to look at him. His profile was outlined against the gray light, strong and familiar, and suddenly heartbreakingly beautiful. My chest ached with the weight of everything I couldn't say. "Ethan, I need to tell you something," he said abruptly, still not looking at me. His hands gripped the steering wheel, even though the truck wasn't moving. "I've been trying to figure out how to say it for months, but there's no good way, and I'm tired of pretending." My heart stopped. Actually stopped. Pretending what? Finally, he turned to face me, and the look in his eyes made it hard to breathe. Conflict wore their fear and hope in something that looked dangerously like the feelings I'd been fighting against. "That I don't," he stopped, swallowing hard. "That things haven't changed. Between us." For me, the words hung in the small space between us, electric and terrifying. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the truck, the world had narrowed to just the two of us, and this moment felt like the edge of a cliff. "What are you saying?" I whispered because I needed to hear him say it, needed to know I wasn't imagining things. Ethan looked at me like he was memorizing my face, like he was afraid this was the last time we'd be this close. "I'm saying that somewhere along the way, you stopped being just my best friend." And I tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it wasn't happening. "But Jamie," his voice cracked slightly, "I can't be around you anymore without wanting." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The unfinished sentence said everything. The rational part of my brain knew I should be careful, should think this through, should consider all the consequences. But that part was drowning beneath the tidal wave of relief and terror and pure, overwhelming feeling that crashed over me. Because Ethan felt it too. I wasn't alone in this impossible, complicated thing. "Ethan," I started, my own voice shaking now. "I thought I was going crazy." "I thought you feel it too." Hope lit his eyes, tentative and fragile. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The confession felt too big, too dangerous. We were crossing a line we couldn't uncross, stepping into territory that could ruin everything. But God, I was so tired of pretending, so exhausted from fighting against myself. "How long?" he asked. "I don't know. Months, Maybe longer, maybe forever. The words tumbled out. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that it would go away. But it just kept getting stronger, and I didn't know what to do because you're your Ethan. You're my best friend. And this changes everything. It doesn't have to, he said urgently, leaning closer. We don't have to let it change anything. We can figure this out, together. Thunder rumbled overhead, but I barely heard it. Ethan's hand had found mine in the space between us, his fingers tangling with mine, and the touch sent electricity racing up my arm. This was real. This was happening. What do we do now? I whispered. He squeezed my hand, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Honestly, I have no idea. But I know I can't go back to pretending. Not anymore. Sat there, hands joined, hearts racing, while the storm raged around us. It felt like the beginning of something and the end of something else, the death of our old friendship and the terrifying birth of whatever this new thing was. I should have been scared. Part of me was, but mostly I felt relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. The rain eventually slowed, then stopped. The sky lightened to pewter gray. Ethan tried the truck again, and this time the engine caught. But neither of us moved to put on our seatbelts or head home. We just sat there, still holding hands, neither of us ready to return to the real world where things were complicated and scary and impossible. We should get back, I said finally, reluctantly. They'll be expecting us for dinner. Ethan nodded but didn't release my hand. Jamie, whatever happens, whatever we decide to do about this, I need you to know that you're the most important person in my life. That doesn't change. Okay, I managed, even though I wasn't sure I believed him. How could something this big not change everything? He let go then, and the loss of contact felt like a physical ache. We drove back to the farm in charged silence, both of us processing what had just happened, what it meant. The confession had been made, the truth spoken aloud. There was no taking it back now. Dinner was a special kind of torture. I had to sit across from Ethan and act normal while my entire world had been turned upside down. Mom asked about our day, and we gave vague answers about fence mending and rain delays. Casey complained about her summer job at the grocery store. Dad discussed plans for the next day's work. All the while, I was hyper-aware of every glance Ethan threw my way. Every accidental touch when we reached for the same dish. After dinner, I escaped to my room, claiming exhaustion. I lay on my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. Ethan felt the same way. The knowledge was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Now what? What were we supposed to do with these feelings in a town where being different meant being ostracized? Where people still used certain words like weapons? Where our families had never even considered that either of us might be anything other than what they expected? A soft knock on my door made me sit up. Yeah. Ethan slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. In the dim light from my desk lamp, he looked young and uncertain, in a way I rarely saw. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. Keep thinking about what we said. Me too. He sat on the edge of my bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. We were close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, close enough that it would be easy to close the distance between us. But I held back, afraid of pushing too fast, too far. I don't know how to do this, I confessed. I've never felt this way about anyone before. Let alone me, he finished, a hint of humor in his voice. Yeah, I get it. Kind of threw me for a loop too. When did you know? I asked that it wasn't just friendship. He considered the question, his brow furrowing. There wasn't one moment. It was gradual. But I guess I really couldn't deny it anymore last Christmas. Remember when you came to visit me at school? I did remember. 3 days in Minneapolis, staying in his cramped dorm room, exploring the city, laughing until our sides hurt. It had felt different than other visits, charged with something I hadn't understood at the time. We went to that hockey game, Ethan continued. And you got so into it, yelling at the refs? And I remember thinking that I never wanted that weekend to end. That I wanted every weekend to be like that, just us. And then you fell asleep on my shoulder on the bus ride back, and I thought my heart was going to beat out of my chest. He laughed softly, self-consciously. "I know how that sounds. Doesn't sound crazy," I assured him. "It sounds like how I felt when you came to visit me in March. When we stayed up all night talking and you fell asleep on my couch. And I just watched you sleep for like an hour because I couldn't believe you were actually there. Creep," he teased. But his voice was warm. Takes one to know one. Oh, we fell into silence. But it was comfortable now, the tension from earlier dissipating. This was still Ethan, still my best friend. That hadn't changed. Not really. We just added another layer to something that had always been there. "I'm scared," I admitted quietly, "of what this means. Of what could happen if anyone found out." "I know. Me too." He shifted closer, his shoulder pressing against mine. "But I'm more scared of going back to pretending. Of losing this chance because we're too afraid to take it." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we don't have to figure everything out right now. Maybe we just see where this goes. Take it slow. Keep it between us for now." It was a reasonable suggestion, a careful approach. But part of me wanted to argue against it, wanted to shout the truth from the rooftops despite the consequences. Years of hiding, of carefully monitoring every word and gesture, had left me exhausted. But Ethan was right. We needed to be smart about this. Cautious. "Okay?" I agreed. "Slow. Between us." He turned to look at me then. Really look at me. And the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. "Can I?" He stopped, swallowed. "It'd be okay if I—" He didn't finish the question, but I understood anyway. My heart hammered against my ribs as I nodded, unable to form words. Ethan leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away, to change my mind. But I didn't move. I couldn't move. Out. And then his lips were on mine, soft and tentative and perfect. The kiss was brief, barely more than a brush of mouths, but it sent shockwaves through my entire body. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. "Is this real?" I whispered, half expecting to wake up and find this was all a dream. Ethan said, his voice rough. "This is real." He kissed me again, longer this time, deeper, and I felt myself melting into it, into him. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb stroking my cheekbone. And I made a sound that probably should have embarrassed me but didn't. Nothing had ever felt this right, this inevitable. When we finally broke apart, Ethan rested his forehead against mine, both of us still trying to catch our breath. "I should go," he murmured, though he made no move to leave. "Before someone comes looking?" "Probably," I agreed, equally reluctant to end the moment. He kissed me once more, quick and sweet, then stood. At the door he paused, looking back with an expression that made my chest ache. "Good night, Jamie. Night, Ethan." After he left, I lay back down, touching my lips where his had been, trying to process what had just happened. I'd been kissed before awkward, fumbling encounters at parties that had felt obligatory and empty. But this was different. This was everything. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept replaying the kiss, the conversation, the weight of Ethan's confession. By morning, I was exhausted but weirdly energized, like my whole body was vibrating at a higher frequency. Work started early. Dad had us moving equipment and preparing the fields for harvest. It was hot, back-breaking labor, but I threw myself into it, grateful for the distraction. Ethan worked alongside me, and to anyone watching, we probably seemed the same as always, two friends, helping out on the family farm. But every accidental touch, every shared glance, every moment alone felt loaded with significance. Around midday, we took a break in the shade of the barn, gulping water and trying to cool down. Sweat soaked through our shirts, dirt smudged our faces. Ethan's hair stuck up in wild directions, and I had to resist the urge to smooth it down. "You've got something," he gestured to his own face, indicating a spot on mine. I swiped at my cheek, missing. "Did I get it here?" He reached out, thumb brushing along my jaw to wipe away whatever had been there. It was an innocent gesture, something he'd done 100 times before. But now, with everything out in the open, it felt charged. Our eyes met and held. His thumb lingered on my skin. "Ethan," I breathed. He pulled back quickly, glancing around to make sure we were alone. Sorry, it's hard not to. I know, I said, because I did. Every instinct told me to close the distance between us, to touch him, to kiss him again. But we were in broad daylight on my family's farm, where anyone could see. We had to be careful. The afternoon passed in a blur of work and stolen moments, our hands brushing as we passed tools, standing closer than necessary, finding excuses to be near each other. It was thrilling and frustrating in equal measure. This secret thing blooming between us. That evening after dinner, Ethan and I volunteered to check on the livestock, a chore that would give us some privacy. We walked to the barn in comfortable silence, the summer twilight painting everything gold and orange. Inside, the horses nickered softly in their stalls, and the air smelled of hay and leather. "Come here," Ethan said, taking my hand and pulling me into the tack room. He closed the door behind us, and suddenly we were alone in the semi-darkness. The sounds of the barn muffled around us. "Hi," I said stupidly, suddenly nervous. "Hi." He stepped closer, his hands finding my waist. I've been wanting to do this all day. Then he was kissing me again, and all the nervous energy, all the pent-up longing from hours of careful distance came pouring out. This kiss was nothing like last night's tentative exploration. This was heat and hunger, months of denied feelings finding expression. I gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, and he made a low sound in his throat that sent electricity down my spine. We broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "We should probably actually check on the horses," I said, though I made no move to step away. "Probably," he agreed, kissing me again. It was several more minutes before we actually made it back to the barn proper, both of us flushed and grinning like idiots. The horses were fine, of course. They always were. But we took our time anyway, feeding them, checking water troughs, stealing more kisses in the shadowy corners where no one could see. "This is crazy," I said at one point, leaning against a stall door while Ethan brushed down his favorite mare. "A week ago, I thought these feelings were one-sided. Now we're making out in your family's barn like teenagers," he finished, grinning. "Yeah, it's pretty crazy. No regrets?" He set down the brush and came to stand in front of me, his expression suddenly serious. "Not a single one." "You." I shook my head. "Scared but not sorry. I can work with scared." He kissed my forehead, gentle and sweet. "We'll figure it out, together." The next few days fell into a pattern. We worked hard during the day, maintaining our friendship facade for everyone else. But at night, after everyone had gone to bed, Ethan would sneak into my room, or I'd slip into his, and we'd lie together talking in whispers, stealing kisses, learning the geography of each other in ways we'd never allowed ourselves before. It felt like existing in two worlds, the safe, public one, where we were just friends, and the private one, where we could be honest about what we felt. But maintaining the double life was exhausting. Every casual touch in front of others had to be carefully calibrated. Every look had to be monitored. I found myself overthinking every interaction, paranoid that someone would notice the way my eyes lingered on Ethan, the way his hands sometimes hovered near mine just a second too long, about a week into the summer. Things started to get complicated. Casey noticed something first. "What's going on with you two?" she asked one morning, when it was just us in the kitchen. Mom and Dad had gone into town for supplies, and Ethan was still asleep upstairs. "What do you mean?" I tried to sound casual while my heart hammered. She gave me a look, the knowing, annoying little sister look she'd perfected over years. "You and Ethan, you've been acting weird? Whispering all the time, sneaking off? Are you guys fighting?" "No," I said quickly. "We're fine. Just tired from all the work." She didn't look convinced, but thankfully Ethan appeared before she could press further. He looked rumpled from sleep, his t-shirt inside out, hair sticking up. My stomach flipped just looking at him. "Morning," he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. "You're up late," Casey observed. "Usually you're the first one awake. Couldn't sleep," he said, catching my eye. The look he gave me was loaded with meaning. He'd been in my room until almost dawn, leaving only when we'd heard Dad's alarm go off. Casey looked between us, her expression suspicious. "Seriously, what is up with you guys?" "Nothing," Ethan and I said simultaneously, which only made us look more guilty. She rolled her eyes. "Whatever. Keep your weird boy secrets. I have to get to work anyway." She grabbed her bag and headed for the door, but paused. "Just, You guys are okay, right? You seem different. We're good, I assured her. Promise. After she left, Ethan and I looked at each other with matching expressions of concern. We need to be more careful, he said quietly. If Casey's noticing, I know. I rubbed my face, exhausted from lack of sleep and emotional strain. This is harder than I thought it would be. He came around the counter, checking the windows to make sure we were alone, then pulled me into a hug. I know, but we've got this. It's just a little longer, and then we'll be back at school, where things are easier. That was true. In the city, away from the farm and small-town scrutiny, we'd have more freedom to figure out what this was between us. But that was still 6 weeks away. 6 weeks of hiding, of pretending, of maintaining this careful balancing act. The days continued, each one blending into the next in a haze of work and stolen moments. But the cracks were starting to show. Ethan became quieter, more withdrawn in group settings. I caught him watching me sometimes with an expression of such longing it made my chest ache. The need to touch him, to be near him openly, was becoming harder to suppress. Things came to a head during the town's 4th of July celebration. Everyone gathered at the community center for a potluck dinner and fireworks. It was the social event of the summer, impossible to avoid without causing suspicion. Ethan and I went together, as we always did, but this year felt different. This year, I had to watch him interact with everyone else, laughing with old school friends, talking to girls who clearly found him attractive while pretending it didn't bother me. Sarah Jennings was the worst. She'd had a crush on Ethan since high school, and she wasn't subtle about it. She touched his arm constantly, laughed too loudly at his jokes, stood too close. And Ethan, being Ethan, was polite and friendly because he was constitutionally incapable of being rude to anyone. But watching it made my stomach twist with jealousy so fierce it scared me. I escaped to the parking lot, needing space and air and distance from the sight of Sarah's hand on Ethan's shoulder. The sky was deepening to purple, the first stars appearing. In a couple of hours, fireworks would light up the darkness. But right now, I just wanted to leave, Jamie. I turned to find Ethan approaching, his expression concerned. What are you doing out here? Needed some air, I said, aiming for casual and missing by a mile. He studied my face, reading me the way he always could. You okay? Fine, Jamie, I said. I'm fine. It came out sharper than I intended. Go back inside. Sarah's probably wondering where you went. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Are you jealous? No, I lied, but my voice betrayed me. He moved closer, checking to make sure we were alone. Hey, look at me. I did reluctantly. His expression was soft, earnest. You know, that's nothing, right? Sarah's nice, but she's not. He stopped, glancing around again. She's not who I want. I know that, I said. Logically, I know. But watching her touch you, watching everyone else get to be close to you, while I have to keep my distance, it's killing me. Ethan, his jaw tightened. You think this is easy for me? You think I want to stand there making small talk when all I want is to be with you? Then let's leave, I said impulsively. Right now. Let's just go. We can't. Your parents will assume we went to watch fireworks from the ridge like we used to. Come on. I held out my hand, bold and reckless. Please. He hesitated only a moment before taking my hand, lacing our fingers together. Okay, let's go. We took Ethan's truck, driving out of town toward the ridge that overlooked the valley. It was our spot from childhood, the place we'd gone to escape chores, to talk about dreams, to watch storms roll in across the plains. We hadn't been there together in years, but the road felt familiar beneath the tires, muscle memory guiding us. At the top, Ethan parked and we climbed into the truck bed, lying back to look at the stars. The sounds of the celebration drifted up from town music, laughter, the occasional pop of early fireworks. But up here, it was quiet, peaceful, just us and the endless sky. I'm sorry, I said after a while, for getting jealous back there. It's not fair to you. You don't have to apologize for having feelings, Ethan replied, rolling onto his side to face me. I get it. This situation, it's complicated. I hate complicated. Me too. He reached out, tracing the line of my jaw with gentle fingers. But you know what? You're worth complicated. My throat tightened with emotion. How are you always so sure? About us, I mean. I feel like I'm constantly second-guessing everything. I'm not always sure, he admitted. I'm scared most of the time. Scared of what could happen if people found out. Scared of losing you. Scared of wanting something I'm not supposed to want. But then I look at you, and all that fear just quiets. Because being with you feels right in a way nothing else ever has. Ethan. I didn't know what to say. How to express the enormousness of what I felt. So instead, I pulled him down for a kiss. We lay there as darkness fell completely, wrapped around each other, kissing and talking and just being. When the fireworks started, we watched them paint the sky in bursts of color and light. And I thought about how everything had changed since we'd arrived at the farm. How much had shifted in such a short time. I don't want to hide anymore, I whispered against Ethan's shoulder. Not forever. I don't know how to come out, especially here, but I can't keep pretending. Not with you, I know, he said, his arms tightening around me. We'll figure it out. Maybe not this summer, maybe not even this year, but we will. I promise. It wasn't a perfect solution. It didn't solve any of our immediate problems, but it was hope, and right now, that was enough. We stayed on the ridge until the fireworks ended and the night grew cool. Driving back, we held hands across the center console, neither of us wanting to break the connection. But as we neared town, reality crept back in. Ethan released my hand and I felt the loss like a physical ache. Just a little longer, he said quietly, reading my mind. Just until we can figure out how to do this for real. Back at the farm, we slipped in through separate entrances and through the front, me through the mudroom. My parents were already asleep, exhausted from the long day. I made it to my room without incident, changing into sleep clothes and climbing into bed. But sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept replaying the evening, the conversation, the promise of figuring this out together. A soft knock made me sit up. Ethan slipped inside, closing the door silently behind him. Couldn't sleep, he whispered, echoing that first night. Me neither. He climbed into bed beside me, and we arranged ourselves carefully, him on his back, me curled into his side, his arm around my shoulders. It felt natural, inevitable, like we'd been doing this for years instead of days. Tell me something, I said quietly. Something I don't know about you, he thought for a moment. Okay. Remember freshman year, when I dated Jessica Chang for like 3 months? Yeah, I hated her. I thought it was because she took up too much of Ethan's time. Now I understood it was probably jealousy even then. The feeling was mutual. She told me I talked about you too much, that I needed to care less about what you thought. We fought about it constantly. That's why we broke up. Seriously? Seriously. She said I was more invested in our friendship than in her, and she was right. I didn't understand why at the time, but looking back, he paused. I think part of me always knew, even before I was ready to admit it to myself. I processed that all those years of friendship in a new context. Did anyone else notice? That we were close in a different way? My roommate, sophomore year, made a comment once. Asked if we were together. I laughed it off, but it shook me. Made me start examining things I'd been avoiding. What did you avoid? The way I felt when you were around. The way I felt when you weren't. How much I thought about you, worried about you, wanted to know everything about your life. I told myself it was normal best friend stuff, but he sighed. It was more than that. I think it always was. Talked for hours, sharing confessions and memories, reframing our entire history through this new lens. It was exhilarating and terrifying. This reconstruction of our past and reimagining of our future. We should sleep, Ethan finally said as the sky began to lighten. Your dad'll have us up in a couple hours. Stay, I said. Just a little longer, he did, both of us drifting off, eventually tangled together in the narrow twin bed. It was risky, anyone could have walked in, but in that moment, I didn't care. I just wanted to hold on to this feeling, this peace, this sense of rightness. I woke to sun streaming through my window and panic flooding my system. Ethan was still asleep beside me, one arm draped across my waist. The house was silent, which meant it was too late. We'd overslept, Ethan. I shook him gently. Ethan, wake up. He stirred, blinking sleepily. "What time is it?" "Late. We need to get up before someone." My door opened. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. My mother stood in the doorway, coffee mug in hand, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding to something I couldn't quite read. Ethan and I scrambled apart, but there was no hiding what she'd walked in on us in my bed, clearly having spent the night together. "Mom," I started, but she held up a hand. "Downstairs. Both of you. 5 minutes." Her voice was carefully neutral, which somehow made it worse. Then she closed the door. Ethan and I looked at each other in horror. "Shit," he breathed. "Jamie, I'm so sorry. I should have left. It's not your fault." My hands were shaking as I pulled on clothes. We both fell asleep. What are we going to say? The truth? I didn't know what else we could say. We'd been caught, and lying at this point seemed futile. We made our way downstairs, where Mom sat at the kitchen table waiting. Dad's truck was gone. He must have been out checking the fields. At least we wouldn't have to face both of them at once, Mom said, and we did. Like children called to the principal's office, the silence stretched out, painful and heavy. Mom studied us both, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "How long?" "How long what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Don't play games, Jamie. How long has this been going on between you two?" Ethan and I exchanged a glance. "A couple weeks," I admitted. "Since we got here? Just since you got here? Or just since you admitted it to each other?" I swallowed hard. She was perceptive, as always. "The second one." Mom nodded slowly, like pieces were clicking into place. I had wondered. "Not specifically about you two, but about you, Jamie. Little things over the years. The way you never seemed interested in the girls Casey tried to set you up with. How you'd light up whenever Ethan came to visit." She paused. "A mother notices things. You're not upset?" I ventured, afraid of the answer. I didn't say that. She took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. "I'm processing. This isn't what I expected to walk in on this morning. But upset? No, surprised. Less than you might think." "What about Dad?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Your father and I will need to talk. But Jamie, you're my son, and I love you no matter what. That doesn't change." She turned to Ethan. "And you've been like a son to us for years. That doesn't change either." Relief flooded through me so intensely, I felt dizzy. Ethan's hand found mine under the table, squeezing. "But," Mom continued, and my stomach dropped again, "we need to have some conversations. About what this means, about how you're going to handle this, about keeping you both safe in a town that isn't always kind to people who are different." She looked at us seriously. "You two need to be smart, careful. Not everyone will be as understanding as I'm trying to be, you know," Ethan said quietly. "We've been careful. It's not careful enough, apparently," she said dryly, but there was a hint of humor there. "Look, I'm not thrilled about finding you in bed together, but I also remember being young. Just maybe let's establish some ground rules about sleepovers." Despite everything, I felt a laugh bubble up. "Yeah, we can do that." "Good." She stood, refilling her coffee. "Now your father will be back soon, and I'd prefer to talk to him about this before he figures it out on his own. So I suggest you to make yourselves scarce for a bit. Go work on the south fence or something. You didn't need to be told twice." We grabbed tools and headed out, not speaking until we were far from the house. "That could have gone worse," Ethan said finally. "Way worse." I was still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "My mom is incredible. She is." He stopped walking, turning to face me. "Are you okay?" That was intense. "I'm okay. Scared about what my dad will say, but okay." I looked at him, this person who had become so essential to me. "At least we don't have to hide from her anymore." "Small victories," he agreed. We worked on the fence for several hours, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Part of me felt lighter. At least one person knew now, and the world hadn't ended. But another part worried about what came next. Dad's reaction, what Mom would tell him, how we'd navigate this new reality. When we returned for lunch, Dad was sitting at the table with Mom. My stomach dropped. They both looked up as we entered, and I tried to read Dad's expression. He was a hard man to read on a good day. All stoic farmer practicality. "Sit down, boys," he said, and we did. Dad was quiet for a long moment, studying his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. "Your mother filled me in on this morning's discovery." "Dad," I started, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. I'm not going to pretend I understand this. I don't. Was raised in a different time with different ideas about how things should be." He paused. "But you're my son. And Ethan, you're like a son to me. And if this is who you are, who you choose to be, then we'll figure out how to deal with it as a family." It wasn't an enthusiastic endorsement, but it wasn't rejection either. Relief and disappointment warred in my chest. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. "I know it's not what you expected. No, it's not." He looked between us. "But I'd rather have an unexpected son than no son at all. That said, I agree with your mother. You need to be careful. This town, these people, they're good folks mostly, but they have strong opinions about certain things. I worry about you." "We'll be careful," Ethan promised. "See that you are." Dad stood, apparently considering the conversation over. "Now, we've got work to do. Hay needs baling in the West Field." Life continued, but everything had shifted. Mom and Dad knew now, and while it was awkward sometimes, they were trying. Mom in particular made an effort to treat Ethan and me the same as always, while also acknowledging the change in our relationship. She stopped referring to Ethan as my brother, for instance, a small thing, but significant. Dad was more reserved, but he wasn't hostile. He just needed time to adjust, Mom explained. This was new territory for him, challenging beliefs he'd held his whole life. But he was trying, and that counted for something. Casey figured it out about a week after Mom's discovery. We'd been more relaxed around the house, not as careful about our interactions, and she noticed. "I knew something was different," she exclaimed when I finally confirmed her suspicions. "This makes so much sense. All those years of you claiming you didn't want a girlfriend, all the weird tension recently, you guys are together?" "Yeah," I admitted, bracing for her reaction. To my surprise, she hugged me. "I'm happy for you. Both of you. Ethan's great, even if he is annoyingly perfect at everything. Don't tell anyone," I pleaded. "Not yet. We're not ready for the whole town to know. Your secret's safe with me," she promised. "But Jamie, you seem happier than I've seen you in years. Don't hide that forever, okay?" With my immediate family in the know, things got easier in some ways. Ethan and I could be more ourselves around the house, could touch casually without constant vigilance. But outside the farm, we remained cautious. The town was small, and gossip spread like wildfire. We weren't ready for that level of scrutiny. The summer rolled on, days blending together in a haze of work and heat and stolen moments. Ethan and I grew more comfortable with each other, learning the rhythms of being together. We had our first real fight about something stupid. Whose turn it was to do some charade. Learned how to work through it. We had long conversations about the future, about what we wanted, about how to make this work when we went back to school. "I want to tell people," Ethan said one night as we lay in the truck bed watching for shooting stars. "Not everyone, not yet. But my roommate, maybe. Some close friends." "Yeah," I agreed. "I want that too. I'm tired of hiding part of myself. It's going to be complicated." "Everything with us is complicated," I pointed out. "But it's worth it, right?" He turned to look at me, his expression tender in the starlight. "Definitely worth it." August arrived, bringing with it the knowledge that our summer was ending. Soon we'd pack up and head back to our respective schools, Ethan to Minneapolis, me to Portland. The distance suddenly felt insurmountable, even though we'd managed it before as friends. This was different. "I don't want to leave," I admitted the night before we were set to go. We were in my room, making the most of our last night at the farm. "I don't either. But we'll make it work," pulled me closer. "Video calls, visits, breaks. We'll figure it out. Promise. Promise." He kissed me softly. "This isn't ending just because summer is. If anything, it's just beginning." The next morning dawned bright and clear. We loaded our things into Ethan's truck, preparing for the long drive back to civilization. The whole family came out to see us off, Mom with tears in her eyes. Dad with gruff hugs and demands to drive safe. Casey with jokes about us being gross and in love. Take care of each other, Mom said, pulling us both into a hug. And call me when you get there, both of you. You will, I promised. We hit the road, leaving the farm behind in a cloud of dust. For the first few miles, neither of us spoke, both processing the end of the summer and the beginning of whatever came next. Then Ethan reached over and took my hand, lacing our fingers together. Ready for this? He asked. I looked at him, this person who had been my best friend. My brother in all but blood, and who was now somehow so much more. The summer had changed us, transformed us, but the core of what we were to each other remained the same. We were still us, just more. Yeah, I said, squeezing his hand. I'm ready. The road stretched out before us, leading away from the farm and toward an uncertain future. But we'd face it together, and that made all the difference. 3 months later, the coffee shop near my campus had become our regular meeting spot during Ethan's visits. We sat across from each other now, hands wrapped around warm mugs, smiling about nothing and everything. So I told my roommate, Ethan said. About us. My eyes widened. You did? How'd he take it? Better than expected. He actually said he'd wondered. Apparently I talk about you constantly, he grinned. His words, not mine. You do talk about me constantly, I teased. But that's okay. I talk about you constantly too. My friends are probably sick of hearing your name. Never. He reached across the table, taking my hand openly, not caring who saw. I could never get sick of you. It still felt daring, being affectionate in public. But we were in the city now, surrounded by people who didn't know us, didn't have expectations. We were just another couple grabbing coffee, and that anonymity was freeing. I've been thinking, I said slowly, about coming out to more people. My professors, maybe. Some of the people back home? Yeah, I'm tired of hiding. Summer was incredible, but I don't want to live in two worlds forever. I want to be able to introduce you as my boyfriend, not just my friend. Ethan's face lit up. Boyfriend. Is that what we're calling this? If you want? I mean, we never really defined I want, he interrupted. Boyfriend sounds perfect. We sat there grinning at each other like idiots, and I felt a surge of happiness so intense it was almost painful. This was real. We were real. And maybe the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Maybe we'd face challenges and prejudice and people who didn't understand. But we'd face it together. Come on, Ethan said, standing and pulling me up. Let's get out of here. I want to show you something. What? It's a surprise. He led me through campus to a spot I'd never noticed before, small garden tucked between buildings. Somehow peaceful, despite being in the middle of the city. We sat on a bench, surrounded by late-blooming flowers and the soft sound of a fountain. I found this place when I visited last month, Ethan explained. Thought it might become our spot. You know, like the ridge back home? Our spot, I repeated, liking the sound of it. I love it, good. Put his arm around me and I leaned into his warmth. Because I have something to tell you. That sounds ominous. It's not, I promise. He took a breath. I've been thinking a lot about the future. About us. About what I want. And I know we're young. I know we're just figuring this out. But Jamie, I'm in love with you. I think I have been for a long time. Maybe always. And I needed you to know that. My heart felt too big for my chest. Ethan, you don't have to say it back. He rushed on. I just wanted to tell you. No pressure, no expectations. Just the truth. I turned to look at him fully, this person who had been such a constant in my life that I couldn't imagine existing without him. Of course I love you. How could I not? You're everything to me. He kissed me then, soft and sweet and perfect. And I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From childhood friends to confused young adults to this whatever this was. It wasn't always easy. It wouldn't always be easy. But it was ours, and that made it precious. What are you thinking? Ethan asked when we finally broke apart. that I can't believe I almost let fear stop me from having this. From having you? I'm glad you didn't. Me too. We sat in our new spot as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In a few hours, Ethan would have to drive back to his school, and we'd return to texts and video calls and counting down the days until we could see each other again. But right now, we had this moment, this peace, this certainty. Hey, Jamie, Ethan said quietly. Yeah. Thanks for being brave enough to want this. To want us? I squeezed his hand. Thanks for being patient enough to wait for me to catch up. He laughed. That warm sound I'd loved for as long as I could remember. Always. As darkness fell, we made our way back to reality. 2 dorm rooms and responsibilities, and the complicated logistics of a long-distance relationship. But we carried with us the knowledge that we weren't alone in this. We had each other, and we had hope. And for now, that was enough. The farm summer had changed us, had forced us to confront truths we'd been dancing around for years. It hadn't been easy, and the path forward wouldn't always be smooth. But sitting there with Ethan's hand in mine, I knew with absolute certainty that every complicated, scary, wonderful moment had been worth it, because real love was always worth it. Epilogue. 1 year later, the farm looked the same as always when we pulled up the drive, but everything felt different. Ethan and I stepped out of the truck, hands linked openly, no longer hiding. Inside, I could hear voices: Mom cooking, Casey laughing, Dad's gruff responses. Ready? Ethan asked. I'm ready. We'd come back for Thanksgiving, but this time we weren't pretending. This time we were here as ourselves, fully and completely. It had been a long year of coming out conversations, some easy, some difficult, all necessary. But we'd made it through, together. The front door opened and Mom appeared, her face lighting up. My boys. She pulled us both into a hug. I've missed you so much. Missed you too, Mom. Inside, the house smelled like home turkey and pie and warmth. Casey tackled us both with hugs, and even Dad clapped us on the shoulders with something like pride in his eyes. We settled into the familiar chaos of family. But with one crucial difference. We didn't have to hide anymore. Later after dinner, Ethan and I escaped to the porch, needing a moment alone. The sky was clear and cold, stars bright against the darkness. He wrapped his arm around me and I leaned into him, grateful for this simple freedom. Happy? He asked incredibly. I said honestly. You? Yeah. He kissed the top of my head. Took us long enough to get here, but yeah, I'm happy. From inside, we could hear the sounds of family laughter and conversation and love. Out here, we had the stars and the quiet in each other. It was perfect. Thank you, I said suddenly. For what? For being patient with me. For loving me even when I was scared. For believing in us when I wasn't sure I could. Jamie, you don't have to thank me for that. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. Turned to look at him. This person who had been my constant through every change and challenge. I love you, I said, because it was true and because I could say it freely now, without fear. I love you too. His smile was soft, genuine, full of promises for all the tomorrows ahead. Always have, always will. The future stretched out before us uncertain, exciting, full of possibilities. There would be challenges, no doubt. But we'd face them together, the way we always had. Because this thing between us, this love, was strong enough to weather anything. As we stood there on the porch of the house where I'd grown up, surrounded by family and love and acceptance, I thought about that day in the truck when everything had changed. When Ethan had finally been brave enough to speak his truth and I'd been brave enough to accept it. Best decision I ever made. Come on, Ethan said, tugging me toward the door. Your mom made 3 pies and Casey will eat them all if we don't go defend our shares. I laughed, following him inside into the warmth and light and love. This was home. This was family. This was us. And it was perfect. The end. Did you love this story? If this love story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional gay love stories. Like this video if you felt the emotions. Comment below and tell me, what was your favorite moment between Jamie and Ethan? And here's the big question. Should I tell you what happened when they faced their biggest challenge yet? Would you want to see part 2 of Jamie and Ethan's journey? Let me know in the comments. Your support means everything.